Hello, I'm Sherilyn Milsom, just scrolling down here so I can see comments. There we go. I am here today to debunk some myths and misconceptions about rent to own, because I have been investing actively in rent to own since about 2009, and I have heard so many interesting comments about rent to own and things that people think must be true. And of course, once it's on the internet, it has to be true, right? So I'm here today to debunk some of those and to clear up a few of those misconceptions. And if anyone would like to introduce themselves, still having trouble getting, there we go, there are the comments. There we go. If you'd like to introduce yourself, let me know what experience you have in real estate, whether you're a landlord, an investor, just a homeowner, who you are. If you'd like to put it in the comment box, I'd be happy to say hello and get to know each other. So please say hi, and hold on, see if I can see who's watching. I'm very new to Facebook Lives, so just beware. Monica, hi, how are you? I see you're with us, and I know you are definitely a real estate investor. Let's see, we'll wait for a couple more minutes for a couple other people before we really get started, but yeah, we're going to be looking at some of the myths and misconceptions about rent to own and try to clear up some of those, because yeah, it seems that the general public makes rent to own out to be the big bad real estate monster, but it really isn't. It's actually a very useful tool both for people trying to sell homes and people trying to buy homes who aren't quite yet ready to qualify for a bank mortgage. Okay, all right, well, so let's just get started. The first misconception that I find is lovely is that rent to own should be illegal. Now, I don't understand why anyone would think that, because rent to own really is a stepping stone to home ownership for someone who is not quite ready to qualify for a mortgage. So why would anyone want to make that illegal when it benefits the tenant buyer? Oh, Monica, hi, yes. You're just closing on a new rent-to-own deal. That's excellent. So you're closing on the sale to the tenant, I assume. So that's really good. The point of rent-to-own is that it can be a win-win. It's a really great way for a homeowner to get rid of a property and make a little bit more money on it, and for a tenant buyer to get into a property and potentially save money on as opposed to waiting and rolling the dice in the open market. There are a handful of unethical operators, rent-to-own operators, of course, as in every industry. I mean, you've got unethical lawyers, you've got unethical business, like shop owners, and when you have a lawyer who is, what do they call them, ambulance chasers, and maybe some of those are not quite so ethical. So in every single industry, you do have unethical operators. But overall, most operators in any industry are above board and reputable. And responsible rent-to-own operators will only accept clients that have a really good opportunity to buy the property and qualify for the mortgage within, say, 2 to 3 years. If you are offering your property to somebody who you don't think is ever going to qualify for a mortgage, then yes, you are unethical. But most of us aren't. And transparency is a big deal. Having it written right in the contracts that here's what the final price will be, we both agree on it, here are all the terms. If everything is laid out properly in the contracts, then it's definitely it's got more of a possibility for a win-win, and there's no reason for it to be illegal. So another one I heard recently is that it's illegal in my area, that it is actually illegal. And the funny thing about that is that a lease with an option to purchase or rent to own That's exactly what it is a residential tenancy lease and then an option agreement, an option to purchase contract. So the lease falls under the Residential Tenancies Act, and anything that contradicts the Residential Tenancies Act of your area is not going to be allowed to continue in the lease. So that will just be, that term will be voided. So there's no reason for anything there to be illegal. And then the option contract falls under contract law, and that is a very broad section of law. Basically, in contract law, if two people agree to something and put it in writing and sign it, it's legally binding. So it's kind of impossible for it to be illegal. So unless you had some sort of specific term in that contract that was illegal. But that's not the case with a lease with an option to purchase. Another interesting myth is that it takes advantage of tenants. This is a direct quote from someone, by the way, so I'm reading it. Takes advantage of tenants in a massive way, especially the most vulnerable. Well, to put it bluntly, rent to own or lease options are not for the vulnerable people. They are not for the less fortunate. In order to qualify to be a rent to own tenant, you need to make a lot of money, and you need to have a bunch of money saved up in order to even get started. So how is that possibly taking advantage of the most vulnerable people? Rent to own is for people who have little glitches in their history. It's not for, you know, people who can't afford the home. So that is just the biggest rent to own myth that I've ever heard. Another one, usury, this is from the same person, by the way. Usury level interest rates are what rent to own charges, and that it's no better than buying a home on a visa. Well, first of all, there is no interest involved in rent to own, because you are not buying the home the tenant is not buying the home at that time, and there's not a mortgage involved between the seller and buyer. Anything with interest would be seller financing, which is a totally different thing. So with rent to own, how it works is that the profit for the rent to own operator, is from mortgage paydown and from lack of realtor fees, mortgage penalties, lack of having to discount to sell your property and attract buyers. So those are the ways that rent to own operators make money. And sometimes there's also a slight markup on the property, because if it is a rising market, then it makes sense that you're not going to sell your property at today's price when you know that in 2 years the price could be here. So the rent to own buyer and seller agree on maybe a price that's here. So it's a very conservative increase that both parties feel is achievable, and it's agreed on by both parties, and there's no interest involved. And if the markup is too high, then the appraisal won't work when the tenant buyer is going to get the mortgage. So then it's kind of impossible to charge usury level anything. Another myth is that there is no advantage for the tenant, but in the years that I've been doing this, I've seen huge advantages for the tenant. One of the big ones, one of the big attractors for tenants is that they don't want to be bothered by a landlord in a regular tenancy situation. So the landlord knocking on their door once a month to check things out. And in a rent-to-own situation, the rent-to-own operators or sellers tend to treat the tenants like they are the future owner of the home. So they step back a bit. I mean, you still have to, make sure everything's going well, but it's a lot more hands-off as far as landlords go. So the tenant really gets to treat the property like his or her own, and that's a huge attractor. Also, any improvements that rent-to-own tenants make on the property are theirs to keep. When they buy the house, any improvements that increase the value are theirs. So they can landscape, they can build a garage, they can do all sorts of things and build value in their home that they're renting that they eventually see the benefit of. And that creates instant equity when they buy the home. So that's a huge advantage. Another myth is that the tenant bears all the risk. Well, that is completely false. There is risk on both sides. So some of the risks for the homeowner are that if the tenant walks away, sure, they forfeit some of their option payments or option consideration, the future down payment, we'll say, but the costs to prepare the house for sale again are actually usually, and then also marketing, are usually a lot higher than what that tenant is walking away from. So the tenant is walking away from their option payment, it becomes liquidated damages, and that money gets used to prepare the house and sell it to somebody else. So, and as I say, usually it costs more than what the tenant is leaving behind. So there's definitely risk on both sides. Another myth is that the non-refundable portion of the option consideration is unfair. Well, again, if the tenant walks away, first of all, they're breaching the contract. They agreed to buy the house, or sorry, agreed that they're committing to buy the house in the future, I should say, and now they're breaching that agreement. So, and as I already said, the penalty, or sorry, the option payment that's forfeit often does not cover the costs of what the homeowner is going to have to pay to get this house back on the market. And if you compare the penalty of forfeiting your option payment to what a bank would penalize you for walking away from a home that you had committed to buy and had a mortgage on, there is no comparison. So if you walk away from a property you've already purchased that you have a mortgage on, you're going to be facing foreclosure, you could be sued by CMHC, your credit is going to be ruined for 6 years or more, and as opposed to walking away from a rent-to-own property, all you're walking away from is a few $1,000s. So the fact that it's unfair is a complete myth. And the next myth is that rent-to-own is only for people with bad credit. In fact, I don't want to do a rent-to-own with people with bad credit. I look for people who have credit glitches in the past. Maybe they had a business failure or a divorce or something else a few years back that caused a few issues with their credit. But overall, they are responsible credit users and do not have bad spending habits and do not have consistently and long-term bad credit. Basically, the bottom line is if somebody needs credit counseling in order to qualify for a mortgage, they are not my client. I do know that there are some people out there who operate rent-to-owns who do specialize in doing rent-to-owns for people with bad credit. But yeah, that's not what I'm aiming for, because again, a win-win type rent-to-own operator is going to want to make sure that they're finding tenants that have a really good possibility of buying the house and getting a mortgage within, say, 2 to 3 years. So if you need some serious credit repair, that might not be for you, because if you've got bad credit habits, if a tenant has bad credit habits that are consistent and long-term, chances are they're going to stay that way. So I would say that rent-to-own is not for people with really bad credit. The next myth that we have is, well, it's more of a question or misconception, not so much a myth. But if a realtor brings a client to a rent-to-own and that client becomes the tenant buyer, then should they get their full commission? Well, if they are bringing a buyer, I agree that they definitely deserve a fee. But remember, the house is not sold yet. The house is going to be sold in, let's say, 2 to 3 years, and it's possible it might not go through. So the realtor definitely should not get full commission right away, right up front, because again, the house is not sold. So if a realtor brings a rent-to-own operator a client, then I would suggest that either they get a referral fee of whatever they both agree on, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, depends on the house and the price and the terms, or they could get their full commission when the sale actually completes, because that's how realtors normally get their commission, is when the sale completes. Now, another one, and this is a big one, another myth is that rent-to-own operators set up tenants to fail. And then, of course, they get the house back, they get the option payments forfeited, and then they market it and, quote, run the same scam again. And that, as I said, there are a few unethical operators or professionals in any industry, but still, that I just find ridiculous. The idea of running the same scam again. Tenants, there are a few things that can be done if, let's say, a tenant is trying to buy and they can't quite buy. Yeah, it is possible that the rent-to-own operator will just take back the house and say, yeah, you're done. But in most cases, as I said, rent-to-own operators are ethical and they are trying to sell their property. They're not trying to just take it back and keep running the scam. They want to sell the property and they want to make a little bit of money on it. So as an example of how we wouldn't run the same scam again, let's say the appraisal is a little bit low, then there are a few options of what we could do. We could reduce the price a bit because, hey, we've made some money on the mortgage pay down anyway, and all the other, lack of realtor fees and all those other benefits for rent to own. So reducing the price of it to make a win for the tenant is one option. Another option is to renew, to give the tenant a little bit more time if maybe their credit isn't quite ready yet. Excuse me. And in some cases, you can make special terms for if the appraisal is low, or if there's a renewal, you can make special terms to continue that win-win idea. And if the tenant really does need to walk away, then there are often times where the property will sell really quickly and the option payments would more than cover the costs of prepping and selling the property again. And in those cases, we have refunded that excess money back to the tenant, because I don't want to make the money twice from the same property over the same time. That would be unethical in my mind. So yeah, if there's money left over after a tenant walks away, then we give that money back. It just makes sense. The bottom line is that tenants are renting regardless of whether they're renting a house that they will never have the opportunity to buy or renting a house that they have the opportunity to buy. So either way they're paying rent. Either way they're paying full market rent, usually. So the only difference is, do they have a chance to buy this house? The other thing is that they're agreeing in advance on the terms of the potential purchase of the house. It's not being forced upon them. Nobody is surprising them at the end with some exorbitant price. This is all agreed on in advance. And that's, at least in Canada, that's how the system works. So the thing is that if they're in a rent to own, they have the chance to build some instant equity by improving the property, and they even have the chance of basically beating the market. We've had so many tenant buyers who have, in a rising market, yes, of course, we've put a markup on the property, but when they went and got the appraisal, the bank appraisal was substantially higher than what we sold the property for. So we've made the money that we wanted, and that keeps us in business and keeps us helping people, but that tenant got thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in instant equity, and they were so happy that they had gone through our program. So, they've got the opportunity to live in the house that they're eventually going to own, so they don't have to move again. They have a less intrusive landlord, and they have the possibility of having instant equity when they buy the house. And what's not to like about that? So those are some of the big myths and misconceptions all debunked for you. And I would love for anyone to put questions or comments down in the comments section, and we will answer them as they come in. And keep watching for our channel, sign up to our Facebook, like our Facebook page is what I'm trying to say, so that you can keep up to date on more real estate and rent to own information. So thank you for joining us, and yeah, see you next time.